This is Curious Minnesota, a Star Tribune project that sends staff from the state's largest newsroom hunting for the answers to great questions we receive from you, our readers. We're here to answer everything you want to know about the state's people, places, and culture.
Welcome to Curious Minnesota. I'm your host, Eric Roper, and it's State Fair season here in Minnesota, and we had a blast gathering questions from fairgoers on Curious Minnesota Day at the Star Tribune building, which was held on August 28th. Here's how it worked. For the first half of the day, we solicited questions from people passing by our stage at the fair. Now, about 100 people submitted questions, which was great. Then in the afternoon, we chose 20 questions and put them on a large homemade billboard. So fairgoers walking by would examine all these questions on the board and vote on which ones they'd like to see us tackle here at Curious Minnesota. About 260 people voted. We had great conversations with people about what Curious Minnesota is all about, and we even met some fans of this project. But if you missed it, don't worry. You can participate from afar by listening to today's show. That's right. You're in the right place if you want to participate because we have recordings of many of the people who submitted questions. So you may be wondering, how can I participate in this thing that already happened at the State Fair? I will include a link in the show notes to a Google form where you can select your favorite question from today's show. Okay, let's get to it. I tried to group these questions into some broad categories, which was a bit challenging to be honest. This is a bit more manic and scattershot than what you might be used to here on the podcast, but we were recording these on the fly, and some people had a lot to say, while others didn't want to elaborate much on their question. There was one or two where my microphone was actually plugged into the wrong jack, but I still wanted to include the question on here, so apologies for that. But give it a listen and keep an ear out for any questions that pique your interest. All right, let's get things started with questions about none other than the great Minnesota get-together itself, the State Fair. What is your name?
Linda Nielsen.
And what is your question?
My question is, who was at the grandstand on August 28th, 1971? Because that's the day we got married, and we've been married 50 years today.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Are you going to go to a grandstand show to celebrate, or just the fair?
No, just the fair. We love the fair.
Oh, perfect. What is your name?
Caroline.
And what is your question?
Why is the cotton candy at fairs?
Where is the cotton candy at the fair?
Yeah.
All right, I hope we get the answer to that question. It sounds like you're ready to eat some cotton candy.
Who was the first artist to play at the grandstand at the Minnesota State Fair?
How many tubes of lip balm do they give out every year?
We're talking about the Star Tribune here.
Yep.
And do you get lip balm here every year?
I get more than one, I would say, but this year it's Sweet Martha's. Every year it's some different flavor, like fresh cut grass or mustard or ketchup or they've had bratwurst.
How much does the cheese curds stand make in a year at the State Fair?
And you have some in your hand.
And they are very good, and there were 30 people in front of me, and it took like a minute to get through the line.
I want to know who won the Creative Beeswax Artwork Division 99 for the Bee and Honey Horticulture Class 91, any other beeswax craft.
Oh my God. I love the specificity of this question. I'm smiling here. Does this mean you're number two?
Yes, I came in second. I've entered candles for the last 7 years and have won 6 ribbons, including a blue ribbon.
You know what else is on people's mind at the State Fair? Food, of course. Here's a selection of food questions.
My name is Mike.
And what is your question?
Where did the Jolly Green Giant, where did it originate from? The concept, the idea of it. Sometimes I drive down there and I see a big billboard with the Jolly Green Giant and I wonder, where'd that come from?
What's the biggest candy store in Minnesota?
I love that. What inspired that question?
From Mommy.
Okay, that's a good...
Why is Jell-O served at church potlucks? They usually serve Jell-O, and it's kind of a running joke, so I just wondered what the history behind it was.
Okay, this next group of questions was a little hard to categorize, but I'm calling it the demographics and language group. Okay, what is your name?
My name is Joni GT.
And what is your question?
Why do Minnesotans have an accent?
Oh, and what inspires this question?
Because I've been told many times by friends, I have a few friends that are from Florida, that I have a very strong accent.
I'm Jay Sterling. I want to know what you betcha means. Yeah, like how did it become kind of part of the Minnesota lexicon?
Yeah, of course. We got a bunch of weird sayings that we say up here, so you betcha.
My question is, how many different tribes are there in Minnesota?
Ooh, like Native American tribes.
Okay. Yes. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
And what inspired this question?
I'm Native American myself, and I'm just curious of how many Native American tribes are in Minnesota.
What portion of the population in Minnesota is German descent?
Okay, and what sort of inspired that?
Well, I'm Dutch, but I was going to say Swedish or Dutch or something, but a lot of the communities I live in are German descent, a lot of German descent.
All right, folks, moving right along. Now we're going into the farming and animals category of today's questions.
What is your name?
Tanya Green.
And what is your question?
My question is, how many farms are in Minnesota?
Ooh, what inspired that question?
I don't know, because we're from Iowa, born and raised, but we live here now, and we know Iowa has a lot, so I wanted to know the sister state.
Thank you so much. That's great.
What's the most common hummingbird in Minnesota?
My question is, what is the total population of hedgehogs in the state of Minnesota? We had one in our backyard, and I didn't know if it was a very rare occurrence or if that's something that's pretty common in this state.
Lots of people wanted to know about lakes, rivers, fish, and all things water-related here in Minnesota.
Name's Lee.
And what is your question?
How big does a body of water need to be to qualify as a lake?
In Minnesota, right? Like, okay.
In Minnesota. I don't care about California.
Okay.
How much shoreline does Minnesota have?
Oh, and what inspired that question?
We're the state of 10,000 lakes.
How many rivers are there in Minnesota?
What inspired the question?
We love to talk about all the lakes, but who thinks about the rivers?
My name's Molly.
And what is your question?
What is the northernmost lake in Minnesota?
My name's Elaine. My question is, for Curious Minnesota, how many lakes are in the land of 10,000 lakes?
How many different kinds of fish are there in Minnesota?
Ooh, I like that question. And what inspired that question?
All the lakes.
Well, that's so cool. Well, thanks for asking that question.
You're welcome.
All right, well, have a great day. What is your name, sir?
Brian.
And what is your question?
My question is, if Minnesota is basically 17,000 lakes, roughly, why is there only 500 fish?
500 species of fish?
No, just 500 fish. It seems like no matter where you go, you can't find fish. You don't get the limit. You're always, struggling to get that amount of fish.
So we're like underperforming on the amount of fish we have for the amount of lakes we have.
Correct.
Because it's too difficult to catch fish here.
Bingo.
My question is, how many fish lakes are in Minnesota?
Fish lakes?
Fish lakes.
What does that mean?
We live on Fish Lake. And I told that to somebody at the airport, and they laughed, and they go, yeah, the land of 10,000 lakes, and you're on Fish Lake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think there's more than one fish lake?
Yeah, I think there is.
And which fish lake, generally in the state, do you live on?
I live on Fish Lake in Maple Grove.
Okay, I hope you're keeping mental notes of which of these questions is your favorite. Next up is jobs, business, and economics.
My name's Gabriel.
And what is your question?
My question is, how many Fortune 500 businesses started in Minnesota?
What will the unemployment rate drop to once the stimulus checks are ended?
My question is, what is the most popular job in Minnesota?
Why are car dealerships closed on Sundays in Minnesota?
We're talking about the blue laws, right?
Exactly.
I think it's like the last one left, maybe.
I hope so.
Okay, this next category is one of those broad ones, but I'm calling it Minnesota History, Geography, and Attractions.
My name is Luis Estrada. I am a teacher, so my question is regarding about how did Minnesota get its name and what does Minnesota mean? I taught 6th grade the past 3 years, so I got to teach Minnesota curriculum, Northern Lights, and I got to connect closely with Dakota people to learn about Minnesota and how Minnesota got its name.
How many caves are there in Minnesota? I know there's some in the south and some in the north.
Caves like that you could visit?
That you can visit, yes. I love everything about Minnesota, and I like the topography. I'd like to understand the topography of Minnesota.
My question is, what is the most haunted place in Minnesota? I expect a very rigorous statistical analysis to figure this out.
My name is Grace Thompson, and my question is it possible for Minnesota to one day become a province of Canada?
Okay, and what inspires this question?
Well, it's something I've thought about many times over the years as a Minnesotan. I'm interested to see what the public opinion would be with Minnesotans. Are people excited about joining Canada? Would they be opposed to joining Canada? And I'm also interested about the history of it because I know there's been a few parts of Minnesota that have thought about joining Canada before, or tried anyways.
How many miles of alleys are in the city of Minneapolis?
And what inspired this question?
We hike the city of Minneapolis a lot, and we're curious how many there are.
Where did the first people in Minnesota settle?
And you're talking like European settlers?
Yeah, like my relatives, where did they come first?
Got it. Okay, and what descent are you?
Swedish and German.
Got it.
My question is, how did the Northwest Angle come about? It seems strange that there's that strip of land that really is not part of our state that's separated by water, and I'm just curious how that came about.
My question is, how many people live in Minnesota who were born here, moved away, like out of state or out of country, and then moved back and live here?
What inspired this question?
I've done that. I was born here, lived here 21 years, moved away for 9, and then moved back. So that's what.
These people wanted to know about things that were the first of something, so I'm calling this the firsts category.
My name is Ellen.
And what is your question?
What is the oldest building in Minnesota?
And what inspires this question?
Well, I want to know if it's like just a regular old building or something with cultural significance.
My name is Todd.
And what is your question?
My question is, what is the first movie filmed in Minnesota?
And what inspires this question?
Just walking around the fair and seeing people you know and then hoping you're going to run into a famous person.
Where should we set the bar here? Is this like Hollywood movie?
I think we need to go Hollywood, yeah. We can't just do the one the guy did in his backyard.
My question is, what is the first electric utility to serve the state of Minnesota, and what is the last area in the state to get electric service? It's really interesting the difference between investor-owned utilities versus democratically run rural electric cooperatives. And so I'm really curious about how it all started in Minnesota and what areas got electric service first and last.
Where is the oldest continuous annual celebration held in Minnesota?
All right, we're reaching our second to last category today, and it's all things Vikings.
Were there actually Vikings before the Vikings were a real football team?
You mean like actual Viking people? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, you mean?
Yes, in Minnesota.
Hi, my name is Kirsten. My question is, did the Vikings really land in Alexandria, Minnesota?
And what inspired this question?
Well, as a child, I'd gone up there for a family vacation. We saw the big Viking statue there, and we see that that is one of their claims.
My name is Jeff Antonson.
And what is your question?
Which Minnesota Viking player has rushed for the most yards?
And what inspired this question?
I want to know.
That's a good, but you're a Vikings fan, I'm guessing?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and last but not least is the uncategorized questions, 2 of which are politics related, and I'm going to call this the potpourri category.
How many Minnesotans in the last 100 years have officially announced running for U.S. president? It seems like we've had a lot of people that have actually run for president, and none of them actually get elected, so...
I'm thinking of like Harold Stassen.
That's 7 times, right, that he announced, so...
My question is, what is the most sustainable city in Minnesota and why? I just think sustainability is a really important issue, and I want to see what Minnesota is doing to help that, or help climate change.
What is the best news in Minnesota?
Like news station or paper?
News station.
News station. So TV?
Yep, TV.
I would like to know what happened to the Voice of Minneapolis, the gigantic Kimball pipe organ that used to be in the Minneapolis auditorium.
Question is, who was the longest serving state or federal elected legislator in the history of Minnesota?
Okay, and what inspires this question?
I'm just wondering who the oldest geezer was who got his way by just sticking around the longest.
All right, folks, remember to click the link in the show notes to cast your vote for your favorite question. Just a little warning here, it's going to make you log into your Google account, which was the only way that we could limit the number of responses per person. So if you'd rather not do that, or you don't have a Google account, email us your choice instead at curious@startribune.com. A big shout out to my fiance, Tane Danger, for helping me at the state fair, as well as the Star Tribune's events manager, Sam Worms, for doing a ton of work behind the scenes to make Curious Minnesota Day a reality. reality. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Curious Minnesota podcast. As always, you can do us a big favor by helping to spread the word about this project and this podcast. We tackle a new reader question every Friday morning online at startribune.com/curious and on Sundays in the print edition of the Star Tribune. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Curious Minnesota. We want to hear from you. Ask questions and read more stories online at startribune.com/curious. Our music is produced by Matt Gilmer. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes or leave a review. And until next time, stay curious.